morning, we're talking with Kim Lopdrop, who also happens to be a friend of mine. Kim, I'd like you to go ahead and just introduce yourself, give a little bit of your background, and then we'll go on to chat a little bit about the American workplace.
Sure. Thank you, Larry. Great to be with you again. And I graduated from the College of William and Mary and then Harvard Business School. Began my career with Procter & Gamble. Decided I wanted to get into the restaurant business, so I worked at Dunkin' Donuts, originally as product manager for coffee, and turned that business around. Wound up being CEO of their international division, where I got to work with Larry and do my first together, do a pretty successful turnaround. Later became chief operating officer of Burger King, which was another turnaround situation, and then joined Red Lobster as EVP of marketing and became president in 6 months, and did that. Had another turnaround for 7 years. Did other things at Darden, including running their specialty restaurant group, which are the fine dining and polished casual brands, and their international division. And then got an opportunity to come back and lead a spinoff of Red Lobster and be CEO of the company for 6 years under private equity ownership. And then when we completed the exit, working for the new owners for another year, just to get through COVID. But that's been my career. I think one of the things I'm proudest of is that when I left Red Lobster, we had been named many times, and we're currently on the list of America's Forbes magazine's list of America's best large employers, as well as their list of America's best employers for diversity.
Well, that's fantastic. One of the things that our course and our students are interested in is what did it take for you as an individual to become successful? What attributes and or skills do you feel you utilized along the way in your career?
Well, it's kind of funny because when I was a kid, I was a shy introvert, and I and probably it was a real growth experience throughout my career, where very often I got opportunities, candidly, that nobody else wanted, but were able to make them a success. Actually, Larry and I worked together turning around the international division of Dunkin' Brands. And I remember when I got the job as CEO, one of the other officers said, my condolences, because it needed a lot of work. We had a currency crisis going on internationally that was affecting some of our largest markets, and we were losing a lot of money. But we were able to turn it around quite quickly, and Larry played a big role in that. But it took us, I think, 120 days to get the business profitable again. And went on to in a short period of time achieving record profits. But it's taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you, and as you get one opportunity and are successful with it, then people give you other opportunities. And the other thing is you grow in confidence. One of the things I've learned is that one of the keys to leadership is people look you in the eye. Say, do you really believe we can win here? And they actually can see right through you. Do you really believe? And really believing is one of the biggest, one of the most important leadership characteristics to building followership, to having people want to be on your team. And tell you the truth, when I was younger, I probably had pretty low self-esteem. Probably had no idea what I could achieve in life. And again, it was through a series of trying real hard to succeed at whatever I was doing, being successful at that, but gaining confidence and gaining new opportunities. And over time, it snowballs. And the other thing I learned that's key is being truly passionate about what you do. If you are passionate about what you're doing, you will overcome whatever obstacles you've got. Work won't seem like work. It'll seem, in some cases, like play. But it sure, you will be so much better at it than if you're doing something you're not passionate about. And I was very fortunate to be able to work for some brands I was able to get passionate about. And I think that was a key to success as well.
Very good. I know that one of the things you talked about, believe, I didn't use that word, but I like it. One of mine was I naively thought we could do anything in my career. And so a lot of times, Kim, I found myself being placed in positions that I didn't think I was ready for. People would say, Larry, we want you to do this. Being in the international division was one of those. I'd never worked in a business internationally. I worked for Wilson Sporting Goods and visited some golf club manufacturing in Scotland, but I never really worked there. And so having the opportunity, it became the most enjoyable job I ever had, because I got to meet all these people and all these cultures around the world. And I tell people all the time, it made me a better human being. I had this American attitude about, we're the best, we're the biggest, we're the brightest. And I like to tell my students about the story when I first went to India and I was watching the news, and I had this aha experience, Kim. When I'm watching the news, they didn't talk about anything in the United States, and I thought I had a bad station. And then I realized they're talking about what's going on in India, not what's going on in the United States. You know what I'm saying? That was just such naivety on my part to have, never traveled around the world, and to have this experience about people care about where they are, not about where we are.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. When I talk to entrepreneurs very often, I realize they maybe didn't fully appreciate all the risks they were taking when they started their business. But they usually make it through. They find a way. And because usually they're doing something they're incredibly passionate about, and maybe they burn the bridges and frankly just have to be successful, and they find a way. But to your point about sometimes not being ready, I tell you a song. I remember contemplating a job where I felt I wasn't fully ready, and I decided to accept it. But at the time, there was a country song that was popular that actually, I don't know if it was the factor, but certainly a consideration in me deciding to take it. It was John Michael Montgomery's song "Life's a Dance." The lyrics are, "Life's a dance. You learn as you go. Don't sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow. Don't worry about what you don't know. Life's a dance. You learn as you go." And there's a lot of truth to that.
Oh yeah.
You inevitably will get in situations you didn't expect, and you're gonna have to figure stuff out. But you probably will.
Well, one of the things I want to kind of segue to, Kim, if I may, is the things that you've seen change in the American workplace during your career. Things such as business attire is a simple example, going from suits to casual attire. So some of the things, whether it's management practices, business attire, cultural changes, your perspective on things that have changed in the American workplace.
Sure. There's some things that have changed, and there's some things that are timeless. On the things that have changed, I remember when I was young, it was really hard to get a good job, and you really had to interview, and you felt really fortunate when you got one. Whereas today, there's a tremendous shortage in qualified employees, and it's frankly much easier to get a job today than I've seen at any time in my lifetime. Because of that, employers, it's always been important to create a great workplace so you can attract the best, not just warm bodies, but the best employees, and retain them over time. Certainly, at least in the hospitality industry, I've seen data that maintaining low turnover is actually the biggest driver of profitability over time. As you
Yeah.
keep good people, they learn their jobs and do them well without all the hiring costs and mistakes new employees make. But you know, so for example, Red Lobster, that was always the single biggest priority was attracting and retaining great people. And to do it, we built a caring culture. And you create career opportunities for people where they can see the growth opportunities, and you mentor them. And we'd have people literally starting as busters or line cooks, winding up as vice presidents with 10,000 employees, or even president with 60,000 employees. But what has changed is, again, the stakes are actually higher because it's harder to retain people. I think I think there are newer and cooler. I mean, technology's become a bigger part of it, and people, particularly the IT people who are so critical, they really want to work on new cool projects. They don't want to work on just maintaining some old legacy system. And so actually having a technology vision is and roadmap that's exciting, that they want to be part of, is important to attracting people. I think throughout the company, having a vision that people are excited about, want to be part of, is really critical. And then of course there's working virtually, which I used to be quite skeptical about, but fortunately before the pandemic, our president at the time talked me into letting people work from home on Fridays. So we built these systems so people could. Then the pandemic hit. Good news is we already knew how to work virtually.
You were ready.
And
how about coming back though? Once you let them go out, were they willing to come back?
Here's the thing, Larry. Once we had been working virtually for a while, and I think we did it pretty well. We would have regularly, depending on where we were in the pandemic, it was originally weekly calls. I think it wound up being every 2 weeks, at the time I retired, to make sure that people knew what was going on. They felt connected. You were recognizing people who'd done terrific things. You tried to make them fun. We did that pretty well. But we did research, and we found that something like 3/4 of employees liked working remotely so much that they said they'd be willing to give up having a dedicated office to have the right to work remotely, a majority of the time. We actually decided to stay remote and convert our office to where you would have shared work. First of all, anybody who wanted to work in the office every day, fine, great. You get, you keep your office. But for those who wanted to work remotely, we would create shared workspaces. And we actually think that is a really important retention tool. The people liked it. It worked shockingly well. I mean, you just had more hours in the day not having to commute.
One of the things that I'm seeing too is it's a generational attitude toward working at home. And that is that the baby boomer managers have a difficult time believing that people are sincerely working and not, fooling around. And as you get closer to Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, all of a sudden the trust factor goes up because they're used to technology and used to the tools that can make you successful. Did you find this issue at home at Red Lobster?
So I'm one of those baby boomers. I was skeptical, but we had no choice but to do it for a while. And you know what? People rose to the occasion, and I think the proof was in the pudding. People were working hard. It was easy to stay in touch with them with the power of, we use Microsoft Teams. It was very easy to schedule meetings, stay in touch. You had to learn, though. You had to work differently. I found it was really important to, be intentional about talking to each of my employees every week and scheduling meetings for that. And if making sure that the marketing person had told the operations person what they were doing and things like that. But once you learn how to do it, it's not hard. And we actually think it is, it actually is better. In fact, not only is what we wound up with more appealing to employees, it actually saves us money because we're going to be able to reduce our footprint in our corporate headquarters by about half. There have been cases where there's an employee we would have lost that we were able to retain. For example, there was someone whose husband took a job in another state, and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave because my husband's, got this job." And I said, "Well, you know what? You actually were working remotely anyway. You can still keep your job from Michigan."
Right. That's great. So that helps with the retention that you were talking about.
Absolutely. So again, I've retired now, but certainly at the point I left, our intention was to continue working remotely. And as far as I know, that the company's still has that view.
That's great. That's great. How about other things that have changed in terms of what I would call the company cultures over time that you've been working?
It is interesting. We happen to work. I happen to work for some companies in Red Lobster in particular over the last 17 years, where the focus on people and diversity was there from day one. I do think it is more important. I think diversity is necessary. Focusing on diversity is necessary today, whereas it may have been optional in the past. I've seen a lot of approaches to diversity in my career. Thank God Bill Darden was focused on this from day one, just out of a genuine desire to do the right thing. And, we built he built, and I did my best to maintain a company where everyone feels welcome and included and has opportunities. We've always been above, actually for women in management, we were literally number one in the entire restaurant industry for a majority of my time at Red Lobster, and well above average in minorities representation. When I retired, of the executive VPs who reported to me, 3 of the 4 were Black, and they got there by merit, not, but our approach to diversity was a little bit different from what I've seen elsewhere, and somewhat influenced by 12 years on the board of Boys and Girls Clubs.
Okay.
Which has a stunningly successful track record of helping kids from disadvantaged circumstances. And it's really very much, the Boys and Girls Club approach is very much about helping kids develop dreams for their lives, showing you believe in them, right, helping them develop a dream for their life and a plan to achieve that dream. And their success rate is unbelievable. I mean, just dramatically better than the general population, even though these, most of the kids are coming from single parent, low income households. And we applied some of that at Red Lobster. And,
that's great. So you had a model to work with.
Through mentoring, trying harder, but I emphasize at the end of the day, whoever was most qualified for a job got the job. Now, we might have worked a little harder to help some folks, who needed extra help. But at the end of the day, it was the most qualified person who'd get the job. And importantly, we not only had a lot of minorities, but they in key positions, but they were successful in those positions. Mm-hmm. And anyway, it's an area where you never can be sure you've got it exactly right.
Right.
But we did our best, and I actually think we got better results than any other company I'm aware of.
That's good to hear. How about management practices over time, starting with your first job out of Harvard, working through 2 or 3 of your employers? The management practices have evolved in terms of basic philosophies towards management. I took a course from Peter Drucker, who I'll never forget, because he imbued in me one particular thing is, don't diagnose the problem, diagnose the cause. And to this day, I live by that philosophy. But management practices that you've seen over your time with your major employers.
Well, there are things that are taught, like lean manufacturing and so on, that have broad application for many businesses, including hospitality businesses or Six Sigma. But the reality is those have been around quite a while at
Right.
this point. I think what's new, well, and the other thing, in hospitality, and I think this is true of all businesses, but creating a strong culture that people want to be part of is incredibly important. Again, that's not new, but it's unbelievably important.
Right.
And you see that over and over again, where values-driven companies with what Jim Collins would call, led by people what Jim Collins would call a level 5, in it for the company and the greater good rather than themselves, is
Right.
going to outperform other companies every day of the week. One thing I do think has changed, though, is technology companies in particular adopting what they call a lean startup mentality. When you have a new company or a new idea,
Mm-hmm.
you figure out the fastest, cheapest way to test that idea. A tech company will create a beta version of something, and it might be the software that they tell you. Imagine an app that does some amazing things. Now, in the first stage, it may not actually be automated at all. It may be a bunch of people working in the background to create the answer and you think it's the brilliant app. But what they're really doing is seeing, is anybody actually going to use this thing? Because 8 out of 10 times it's a dog, and they're not, and they don't want to waste the time and money perfecting a product that isn't going to go anywhere. And so if in fact they market this thing and nobody uses it, they can just kill it. If somebody if it does catch on, though, that people are buying it, okay, well, then we build the real systems and build it out and
Right.
launch it. One of my daughters works for Intuit, and that's what they do. They use that lean startup approach on new products. I remember I once got a notice from Amazon about a new version of Alexa that would comment on what you were wearing that day. And I said, this has to be a joke. And it was so, but I had a daughter who worked for Amazon on Alexa, so I ordered it. And sure enough, it was one of those betas where they said, well, sorry, it's not available yet, but you will be the first to know when we actually release this product. And I think they actually did release it. But anyway, that's different than when I was younger, when everybody would work to perfect the new product, even though 8 or 9 out of 10 wouldn't go anywhere. And
Right.
People are just moving faster today.
Well, that's kind of in line with the fail fast philosophy too, which is fail fast, learn fast. Don't be afraid of failure. Too often in corporations, conservatives at the top that they overanalyze, They want to do data analysis until those cows come home and the product never gets off the ground.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many competitors these days. You have to get to market quickly if you want to be successful. And some failures are inevitable. I hate to reuse the old baseball analogy, but I mean, if you look at the greatest home run hitters of all time, not only are they leaders in home runs, they're leaders in number of strikeouts. People forgive the strikeouts though, because they hit a lot of home runs.
Moving on to something different, political impacts in running a business. Politics and laws in general have affected hospitality business significantly, business in general. What are some of the key things that you've seen along the way that have affected your business as you've been working?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways politicians affect our business through things like minimum wage laws, through things like laws affecting the ability to unionize, and happily we're not we're unionized in the U.S. But certainly, we've seen recently individual Starbucks stores, individual Amazon locations getting unionized. Certainly, I'm involved in a few businesses that I mean, for example, I'm on the board of Wawa, which sells gasoline, and so certainly government's impact on encouraging electric vehicles is a major consideration there that you have to think about. And by the way, we're actually the largest. We have more Tesla chargers at Wawa's than any other company in the United States.
I haven't seen any gas stations having charger stations or charger units at their stations, but that's a good model to think about if you're in that business.
Well, except that we did make some money on gasoline and don't actually make any money on the charging. So
really? Okay.
Yeah. But it does bring people in, and a lot of those people buy food and coffee and things like that. And we've grown our food business far beyond what any other convenience store has done in the United States. So we do value that traffic, even if we don't make money on the charging. And the truth is, our margins on gas were low anyway, because we were always trying to be the price leader. But things like that, are certainly major challenges that, are government driven, and taxes are government driven. I'm going to avoid saying the name of the company here, but I was on the board of a company a number of years ago. I did a calculation on how much the government was collecting in taxes versus how much shareholders were getting. And you look at not only income taxes, but payroll taxes and sales taxes and taxes on certain products that bear their own tax, alcohol, tobacco kind of thing.
Right.
The government was getting 10 times as much as shareholders were getting. 10 times.
Oh my goodness.
And people don't realize that they focus on one tax rate, forgetting that a whole bunch of things are taxed. And
absolutely.
And even your profits, they get taxed again when the profits are paid out as a dividend.
Right.
And most shareholders will transfer shares, and the value of those shares is simply the present value of the future income stream. But they also get taxed as capital gains, so that those earnings are taxed 3 times, and that's after all these other taxes.
Right.
And then people wonder why things cost so much. Anyway, government has a big impact on businesses.
Well, there's some. So I would suggest too,
actually, if I could just say one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
we talked about, you know, uh, back when we were young, it was pretty easy to start a business. You just needed to figure out what needs were needed to be met and how you were going to meet those needs, and it wasn't very hard. Today, the regulatory hoops that people have to jump through,
Yeah.
it makes it impossible, particularly for people who can't afford to go out and hire a bunch of lawyers, which means it has a disproportionate impact on minority populations. This overregulation is contributing to the income disparities that we are seeing, because it's the lower income and minority folks who can't afford the expensive lawyers to go navigate through all this nonsense.
Well, one of the things that I still do here in San Diego is I conduct a workshop 2 or 3 times a year for people who want to start a restaurant. And it's associated with the Small Business Administration. And I usually get 20 to 30 people that attend my presentation. And I spend most of my time convincing them they do not want to start a restaurant.
Well,
and part of it is the regulatory piece, but the biggest issue is 2 things. Number one, they have no idea the amount of work they're going to have to personally do, and 2, they don't understand unit economics of a restaurant. They think if I open it, the old Field of Dreams, if I open it, they're going to come. If they come, I'm going to make money.
Yep.
And so it's but the regulatory piece is exceptionally tough here in California. I mean, we're the toughest in the U.S. on regulation.
Yes.
I guess let me flip on that just for a moment, though. Would you suggest, though, that there are some benefits of government regulations as it relates to safety on consumers, product protection, and employees?
Certainly, there is a place for regulation, and look, I'm the biggest fan of health departments. They're absolutely necessary.
I got 3 kids in it.
So there is absolutely a role for it, but I think government typically manages to make things 5 times as complex as it should be.
Yeah.
And it's maddening.
So the issue isn't that there are benefits; it's the methodology that's utilized to, if you will, implement those benefits.
Yeah, and again, there's the lack of, they are, they are in power, and they some of them think you're there to serve them instead of that they're here to serve the people and help.
Absolutely.
That's unfortunate.
Let's shift again, if it's okay with you, Kim. Let's talk about people coming into the workplace today versus when you came into the workplace. What were the qualification expectations at the time you entered the workforce, for people in general, not people with an MBA from Harvard? And how has that evolved today? And I'm going to give you a context. My impression is that we are asking oftentimes, not we, you, but we, the general American workplace, are asking for greater and greater requirements as it relates to degrees and so on for jobs that previously didn't have those same requirements. And so that's one thing that I've noticed a change. For example, my mother was an executive secretary. Today, to be an executive assistant, they want you to have a bachelor's degree. My mother went to college, and she was a great executive secretary. So
yep.
I've seen these changes, and I'm challenged by the thinking that's going on there. And again, I think it plays to your point that you made earlier about the disadvantage not having some of those qualifications, and yet it's not really a legitimate requirement to actually perform the task. So with that opening, I'll turn it over to you.
I think it varies by type of job. Certainly, a larger and larger percent of the population, does have good educations than used to be the case when I was a kid. And so yes, I think the expectations are higher today than they were then. My experience, though, has been that, frankly, the most important things to getting ahead in a career are things like are attitude driven, and often attitude is driven by, is somebody doing something they're genuinely passionate about or not.
Okay.
And my experience has been that people who are doing something that they love, that they believe is important, are quite successful at it and can be trained. So I am personally willing to overlook overlook whether somebody has a degree or not, for most positions. Now, I would not hire a chief financial officer who does not, have at least a bachelor's degree and perhaps probably an MBA for certain specialized positions.
Right.
But for typical positions or general counsel, yeah, they really do have to have a law degree. But I know of many cases of people without the normal degree who've actually been quite successful.
Right.
And now, that's not to say that you can put anybody in those jobs. Again, I'm talking about people who have a unique fit with those jobs from a personal passion standpoint. But I mean, to your point, yeah, yes, that probably is true. Now, some areas are people are getting less, more relaxed about hiring standards. For example, it used to be, I mean, we wouldn't hire servers in restaurants who had tattoos because some guests disliked them,
Right.
and that's really, became prevalent enough that we ended up having to remove that standard. But that's those kind of appearance standards used to be kind of normal, and they've clearly been relaxed broadly.
Right. Good point. So if you were giving advice to someone coming into the workplace today, either a domestic student or an international person who says, I'd love to work in America, what would some of the key attributes that you would say they like to have and or display during the course of pursuing that opportunity in a business today?
In pursuing, in applying for the opportunity? Correct. Okay, so first of all, choose something you really can get passionate about, because you're going to be far more successful at it if you are. Secondly, if you think about the career you want to pursue, try to get your first job working for the best managed, most reputable company you can in that field. There's a food chain phenomenon in business where you can always move from a larger company to a smaller company, but it's hard to move the other direction.
Right.
You can always move from a highly reputable company to a less reputable company, but it's hard to move in the other direction. So start high on the food chain, and then you can change. There's more options for changing jobs later than if you start low on the food chain and have no way to move up. Third, I think particularly if you're just getting out of school, you want to really know what field you're getting into and understand, is this a job you really want to do? Now, one thing you can do is reach out to people who have the kind of job you want, or who are people who hire those kind of jobs. And instead of saying, I want a job, say, I'm really interested in, this type of work, or really interested in your company, and I'd like to learn more. Would you be willing to grant me an informational interview so I can learn more about it and how to break into the field? Now, almost nobody is going to turn down that kind of request.
Right.
But and typically if they get to know you and they know you're passionate about what they do and their company, if you make a good impression, they're very likely to try to figure out and, help you figure out how to break in. And it might just be they happen to have an opening that fits what you're looking to do.
Right.
So that's a much better way to get in front of people. You have much higher odds of success if you can do that. Now, even in the absence of that, though, if there's a job you want, apply. Most companies have websites with career sections, and you can get on there and see what kind of jobs they have open. And most jobs get filled that way these days. I had one daughter who graduated from a college that's really good at liberal arts, but maybe not known for tech. And yet she applied to some tech companies based on one in particular that she thought would be a good career fit, and got the job just by applying, online through their database. And she's doing really well with them now. She's the youngest officer in that high tech company.
Now,
today.
did she have the passion that you're talking about?
Yes.
How did she get passionate about tech with a liberal arts degree? That's an interesting point for me.
She had a unique opportunity prior to that, where she was allowed to design the communication systems for a reasonably large company. It's a long story, but think of it as an internship opportunity where she was able to demonstrate that she could put some points on the board, and it happened to fit what this company does.
Well, that's cool. So she literally kind of dipped her toe into it almost by accident, loved it, and then went after it.
Yes.
That's a great story. That's a very good story. And I think you're right. I think passion is an important one. I'm going to give you a real quick story. I have students that have various backgrounds. All of my students have at least undergraduate degrees, and many have masters, and some even have PhDs, doctoral degrees. But I had one student come in, and he was from Columbia, and he was an educated doctor, but he didn't want to be a doctor. And I'm thinking to myself, as a parent, I'm not sure I'd be happy about that. He wanted to work for his uncle in the furniture business. So he was coming to UCSD to get business background so he could go back and help his uncle in the furniture business. And I thought, there's a passion, and he's abandoning what his parents wanted for him so he can pursue what he'll be. And I'm betting, because he was a bright kid, that he'll be quite successful as a furniture person.
I'll bet you're right. And the fascinating thing is, you can do really well financially in almost any field. Look, there are people who run giant furniture companies, and
Exactly.
look, the guy who founded IKEA, became a multi-billionaire.
Right. Still gives lousy instructions.
Yeah. Almost any field, if you're really among the very best, you will do extraordinarily well financially. If I can just say one thing, because I know you have a lot of students. I remember when I was graduating from college, I looked in the school newspaper, and they had this chart about, the average marketing major makes this, the average economics major makes that, and so on. And I remember studying this thing, and I remember when I had those first job offers, I was really agonizing over really very small differences in salary and which one should I choose. And I did not choose the one that paid the most. But I'm, with the benefit of hindsight, I'm embarrassed that I focused at all on what those starting salaries were, because I wound up making over 100 times those starting salaries. But the reason I ended up doing well is I wound up choosing a career path that actually did allow me to do things I was passionate about, that did allow me to be successful and grow. And actually, that highest paying job, I mean, it was in auditing for a major New York bank. And I can tell you, I'm not passionate about auditing. I would hate to think what would have happened
Had you gone that route.
Done that. And there have been several other times in my career I've literally made decisions to work for half what I could have made elsewhere. Or
Right.
In the short term, some might argue that didn't make financial sense, but yet in the end, you never know about the road not taken. But I'll tell you, I wouldn't do it differently looking back.
Good for you. Well, any kind of closing advice that you'd like to share with my students about, workplace in America?
A lot. One thing we often, I mean, we're all very aware of what we want to achieve ourselves, but one of the biggest success factors is figuring out what you can do for others. And actually, business is, in business, you are figuring out an enterprise that is going to cost a lot of money to operate, but it exists to meet the needs of customers better than other businesses can. And if it doesn't meet the needs of customers better than other businesses can, it will go out of business. And you have to attract employees. And the only way you can attract employees is by creating a better employment proposition, which includes salary, includes how people are treated, how proud they are of what they do. It actually has to be better than what other people are offering them. You have to pay your suppliers, a competitive price, or they won't sell you stuff.
Right.
You need capital, so you got to go to investors and you got to give them a good return, even after paying taxes and other costs. And so you actually have to think about all your constituencies, and you have to be making it worthwhile for them. Typically, the biggest needs in the market, the biggest opportunities are the biggest unmet needs. And, the people who are focused on figuring out needs they can meet are for others are actually the most successful for themselves. And often the people, I see people in business who may be very bright, but they are totally focused on themselves and they're not getting ahead, and they can't understand why. Because they're focused on themselves.
Right.
The people who are getting ahead are focused on how am I, creating opportunities for others. Yes, they have to fit in a way that advances what they want to achieve. But a lot of leadership is about convincing people to do what you actually want them to do, but in a way where they understand why it's in their interest as well. And
very good.
You wind up with win-win results. Good for you and good for them.
Absolutely. Very much, Kim. That was a very informative and enjoyable interview.